Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Spectator Film Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Max.
And I'm Austin.
And today we're doing a great gateway movie into horror, The Gate, which was Austin's pick, so I'm going to ask him to explain himself.
So I chose this movie for a number of reasons because it has a lot to offer. Like you said, this movie is kind of... It's very weird because it seems accessible by a very broad audience. You can watch this movie as a kid, and it's going to be like trying to scare you on your own terms. It's not going to be like offering explicit gore all the time. It's not going to be trying to viscerally frightening you, but it will address you about things that you're frightened of as a child. And that's a very special thing. At the same time, it doesn't sacrifice any of its ability to be scary to adults either. And I think movies like that are genuinely very rare. So it's obviously very interesting to talk about them when they do come up. Aside from that, I think it's an incredibly 80s movie. It is our first heavy metal horror movie.
Heavy metal horror, which there was a lot of in the 80s for some reason.
Well, I mean, it's just because heavy metal became popular.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's obviously probably our favorite subgenre of any genre ever, I'm going to say.
Speak for yourself, but okay.
But either way, I think this movie really integrates that in an interesting way. And obviously, because of that, it's going to integrate with, the moral panic surrounding metal. It's also very much related to the kind of like Reaganite cinema influenced teen horror movies happening around that time, most of the other ones being slashers. So yeah, it's just a very interesting movie. It connects to a lot of 80s things in the zeitgeist, and I don't know, there's just also a lot of interesting subtextual stuff going on as well about how it relates to like suburbia and these kids' existence. So it's just a very satisfying movie, I would say.
That's a very good word to describe it. It's an interesting position for me because I feel like if I had seen this movie at a younger age, it would still be one of my like favorite movies of all time.
Sure.
It would have just like imprinted on me. I didn't see it until my late teens, though, and because of that, I appreciate it. I really do, and I think this movie does a very unique job of not just having a child protagonist, but sort of framing the entire logic of the movie through a child's eyes in a very fairly unique way for a horror film.
And effortless.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that's what really makes it stand out, and as we said before, if you have somebody younger in your life who you want to try to get into horror, see if they're ready for it, this is a great place to start. Or if you just want another spooky season Halloween movie, this is a great one to watch.
Yeah. But again, like this, if I had seen this as a kid, it would have genuinely scared me.
Yeah.
It's really impressive how it manages to make the horror aspects like aesthetically approachable to children without compromising on how much it's trying to scare them. I find that just very interesting. So that's going to be a big sort of, I'm going to say, focal point of our conversation throughout the commentary track. Aside from that, Max, I don't really have too much else to add, aside from hoping that you do not slander the Killer Dwarfs any more than you already have, the band that shows up in this movie.
I mean, they don't actually show up.
They're merchandise. On their way to becoming one of the most valuable brands in human history, I would assume.
It's going to beat the shit out of Pokemon and Hello Kitty. It's going to be Killer Dwarfs all the day. But until then, Austin, why don't we take a step through the gate, start this commentary?
Let's do it. Welcome to the gate, everyone.
We have passed through the gate.
Yes, and the version of this movie we're watching is the amazing Vestron Video home video release, the Blu-ray. The special features on this thing are incredible. There's 2 commentary tracks. There's a ton of special features. If you can manage to get a hold of this version of this movie, it's fantastic.
I did mention disappointment that there was no like super special collector's edition that came in like the heavy metal album.
Yes,
with prominently in the movie
with the slipcase that tells them how to fight the demon. Yeah, it's so good. That also would be an amazing prop to own, frankly. There's a number of amazing props in this movie, and we'll see all of them in due course. However, before we get too far into the movie, I want to bring back some critical terms that are going to be relevant to our conversation of it. Specifically, critical terms defined by a man named Mark Fisher in his book, The Weird and the Eerie. that we have referenced before in the show. They are two terms that are sort of born out of an elaboration on the Freudian term, the uncanny.
A consistent theme on our show, especially when it comes to horror films.
Yes, because it's so effectively and consistently used in horror movies. Now, the uncanny, I'm not going to elaborate on all of it right now, but it's essentially this phenomena where the familiar and the unfamiliar are present in the same moment or object, right? Now, the weird and the eerie are both related to it and elaborations of it. And the first quote I want to drop from Mark Fisher is when he surmises them at the beginning of the book. He says, "What the weird and the eerie have in common is a preoccupation with the strange. The strange, not horrific. The allure that the weird and the eerie possess is not captured by the idea that we enjoy what scares us. It has rather to do with the fascination for the outside, that which lies beyond standard perception, cognition, and experience." Which, of course, is going to happen in this movie. We're going to have some things infiltrate this domestic space, this constructed version of suburbia from beyond, from the outside, from another world.
It's an interesting thing, but this is very, like, I don't want to get into too much of this now, but this is very, like, a child's view of suburbia, where, like, there are two places that he can be at any given time. His house and his friend's house.
You got your friend's house, yard, and the street.
Yeah, that's it. That's all there is. Nothing else
very
exists.
Abstract, you know? It feels less like a grounded version of suburbia and much more like you said, like a child's idea of suburbia, but more like maybe like suburbia as it exists in a distant memory, you know?
I'm going to disagree with that, actually.
Okay.
Because a lot of these movies, and I get this from, like, because this movie came out a couple years after Poltergeist, and you had mentioned that that's
obvious influence
for this movie. But the problem with Poltergeist, I love that movie. But
so do I.
It is very much a Steven Spielberg movie, despite the whole Tobe Hooper directing brouhaha.
Sure.
Spielberg's movies tend to create an image based on like what adults remember childhood to be like, almost.
Okay. Nostalgia.
Yes,
you're correct.
This movie doesn't feel nostalgic for anything. It feels like that's what this child is currently living through.
You know what? I will clarify, because I agree with everything you're saying. And I do not want to say this movie is nostalgic, because I would say it absolutely is not. I would say it's like if you were walking around inside a memory physically rather than reflecting on it fondly.
Yes. And walking around inside of a memory is a good way to describe this opening sequence.
Yeah.
Which is great.
It is good.
Because normally in movies, when, like, your first scene is like, oh, it was a dream, it can come off as, like, annoying and cliche. But for this movie, it works. One, it sets the tone. And two, not a lot of creepy stuff happens very early on in this movie. So it's a good way to start off strong and then introduce all of your characters and get the general plot of the movie going.
It also earns a little bit of credit by having some pretty intense pyrotechnics and like physical effects work right away. They had to build. So I watched the commentary track and the special effects with this stuff. That's a beautiful cut, by the way, where it looks like it's a match cut, but it's not. And you see the wood boards of him writhing in his bed, but it looks like the wood boards of the treehouse that he had.
Very flawlessly done.
It's kind of like a poetic transition. But anyways, there's some fun stuff about that tree exploding. They had to build a whole gimbal to like lower it down and everything. And obviously there was some pyrotechnics. However, when they exploded it, apparently it almost killed the director immediately.
Oh my God.
Where like a giant splinter went right past his face. So even the professionals sometimes end up in unsafe situations making these movies.
Fuck it up. That would have added to this movie's legacy if the director fucking died during the making of it.
Based on the interviews, he seems like a pretty chill, awesome guy. So that would have been very sad.
Yeah, we have any aspiring horror film makers out there who are listening to this podcast for movie making tips? First of all, why? And second off, kill yourself in the middle of your horror movie and it will instantly gain notoriety.
Yes, because then like Poltergeist, you'll have a death curse on your horror movie. Now,
well, Poltergeist had a death curse because they literally used human bodies to save money.
That's true. They literally involved themselves and implicated themselves in the thing that they were depicting, which is kind of funny. I also love how like who's the mom in that movie? She's so good, but Steven Spielberg didn't tell her that the skeletons.
No,
were
they
real.
didn't tell any of them until afterwards.
Steven! I can only imagine how furious she must have been. I also would have been furious to be like, Steven, you didn't test this thing for some disgusting disease. This is how coronavirus happens. What the fuck are you doing?
That's actually how coronavirus started. It's been going.
Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, Steven Spielberg filming Poltergeist.
Oh man, god damn it, Steven.
It slowly transmitted its way to China, and then it fully evolved and came back here. So what we're saying is coronavirus won't end until it kills Steven Spielberg.
We gotta offer. I'm sorry, but we gotta offer you up. It'll be like that scene from fucking Temple of Doom. I'm gonna be standing there ripping your,
Kalima.
and then just the COVID approaches out of the fire pit.
COVID-19.
Oh man, good times. I want to point out this moment, Max. The slightly too disgusting and gory depiction of the splinter in Steven Dorff's hand. It's a surprisingly repulsive way to show a splinter in someone's hand, and I think that amount of gore kind of buys this movie stakes for the upcoming 40 minutes in which not as many explicitly scary things happen, and it's more small details that something is off. You've seen blood and you've seen gore in a moment when you might not have expected it, and I think it buys a lot of faith for the movie. What do you think of these child performances, by the way?
I mean, fucking Steven Dorff is Steven Dorff. Like, he's an amazing child actor. He really is. He can't, like, he's always so genuine in whatever movie he's in. You truly believe that he is a child.
You've seen him in a lot of things as a child?
A couple of things, but like, he is a great child actor.
He's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, very. And he carries the last part of this movie too.
Oh, 100%.
Despite all the effects and everything, he makes it actually feel grounded because like everything is exploding and you need it to feel real and earned.
Oh, and then we have Teenage Friends.
Teenage friends stealing the sister Al,
which is a consistent theme that I thoroughly enjoy in this movie. And I might be biased as somebody who is relatively close with their sibling, but like I love that ennui of this movie of just like, oh, we used to do everything together and now she's trying to have a little bit of her own life, and I'm not sure how I feel about everything changing.
I mean, I'm not sure I would call that on. They are caught in ennui,
Yeah.
kind of, but that's suburbia, and it like I wouldn't call his like relationship with his sister related to ennui at all. But like it is definitely an interesting thing, and also it wasn't in the first draft of this movie. It was originally supposed to be two brothers, and they were supposed to be a lot more devious, and I think it was supposed to be a little bit more moralizing too, which is something I really appreciate about this movie. It's not a moralizing movie, which will relate to its connection to, you know, heavy metal discourse throughout the 80s and the moral panic there. It's not a moralizing movie, though. The drama between him and his sister and his friend Terry is organic. There's nothing contrived to make it feel, you know, artificially earned. It's just that she's growing up. She wants different things. Terry is going through his own experience, having lost his mom, and he's just trying to maintain some sense of like consistency and friendship with the people in his life.
Yes, and the fact that his parents are literally going away and leaving him in the care of his sister. Normally, like, he should be super excited about that, but he doesn't know how to feel about his sister now, and it's another uncharted territory. Everything is this child's known world getting flipped upside down, and I think the movie carries that throughout the entire thing. It doesn't forget about it at any point, and then making peace with those changes, but still finding a way to maintain what you loved about the past. I don't know. It's a very consistent theme throughout the movie, and it's very charming for me.
Yeah, and like you said in the introduction, the way this movie sort of plays with the logic of a child, it tries to follow the logic of the emotional through line where the characters are at in every scene, rather than try to provide a like one-to-one like causal explanation of all the weird shit that is happening, which I think is in its benefit because it maintains an atmosphere of kind of like a dream-like state that I think retroactively makes you accept the opening dream sequence more, but also just makes this movie very powerful and unique. But also it's like, it is the more important thing to try to nail the characters. I don't like need a strict one-to-one explanation about why the demons were able to make him like levitate for some reason. I don't care. The thing that matters is that he got embarrassed in front of other people, you know? This is also a really great scene.
I do love that in the subtitles. The dad isn't even like titled as dad. He's man. He has no name.
Maybe that's his name. Have you ever thought of that, Max?
I didn't think of that.
What about the Isle of Man?
What about the Isle of them?
Oh man, I was just gonna make a joke that the Isle of Man must have been named after someone, but the Isle of them, that sounds a lot scarier. Anyway, the scene we're at right now is this really incredible scene where Stephen Dorff's father is explaining that his friend Terry probably told Stephen Dorff that a workman died in the walls of his house to scare him because, you know, Terry is having some issues with emotional regulation and dealing with the loss of his mother the previous summer.
And that starts something that I love, because in almost any other cookie cutter movie like this, if you have like the heavy metal kid who's into like demon infested metal rock music,
Yeah.
he'd be a purely corrupting influence on this, and they'd just dismiss him as just like, oh,
It'd be like Footloose.
you shouldn't be hanging out with Terry
Yeah.
anymore. Terry's a bad influence on you. But no, the dad, in his very brief portion of the movie, is just like, listen, man. He never tells him to stop hanging out with Terry. He's never just like,
He just contextualizes
he's
Terry's
like,
behavior.
listen, like Terry's gonna be a bit weird for a while. It's hard when your mother dies. Like you just like, he's gonna say some stuff that like might upset you. He's just doing it to try to work through some stuff. Like the dad is so understanding of his kid's random friend, and I really find that nice.
It's not only that, it's like he's supporting their friendship.
Yes.
Because it's like, you know, this thing might make you less of a friend of Terry without the context. I'm trying to provide you this context.
No, and he's just like, I know my kid is good deep down, so he's probably going to be a positive influence on Terry.
And it makes like we were saying, all the drama, the interrelationship drama, completely organic. There's no contrived thing where he's like, you got to stay away from Terry, you know? But also it makes the resulting rest of the movie like more complex emotionally. Because like the trauma of like, I don't want to say the trauma I was sick of people talking about horror movies with trauma, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But like the things that they're working through as children and like the iterations of their parents that come back to haunt them. It would be very easy to have a movie where it's this one-to-one thing where their parents like mistreated them or raised them poorly or had some bad habits that then were like metaphorically represented by the demons. It's not that complicated. It's less about what their parents do as individuals and more about the fact that even if their parents do the right things, there's still certain emotional things they have to work through on their own.
Yeah.
And it's a more complicated thing to be faced with that.
Yeah. And now we have high school party.
We have high school party. Now, Max, this is a ridiculous party where everyone is wearing kind of like if they were going to an 80s parody party.
Yes.
This is what it would look like.
If today we were just like, let's go have a party, it's 80s themed. Like,
Yes.
This is what people would be wearing.
Now, Max, before we get too far into it, though, I do want to go back to talk about the weird a little bit. I want to bring up the quote now because I think this is a good time. And the weird is a very specific part of what Mark Fisher is going for in that book. But in this movie, I think it is best represented by the geode, the thunder egg. Why? Because it's this thing that is out of place and you're not expecting to find underneath this tree, and it immediately compels further investigation. So Mark Fisher writes about the weird. He writes, "The weird is that which does not belong. The weird brings to the familiar something which is ordinarily lies beyond it, and which cannot be reconciled with the homely, even as its negation." And then further on, he writes, "I want to argue that the weird is a particular kind of perturbation. It involves a sensation of wrongness. A weird entity or object is so strange that it makes us feel that it should not exist, or at least it should not exist here. Yet if the entity or object is here, then the categories which we have up until now used to make sense of the world cannot be valid. The weird thing is not wrong, after all. It is our conception that must be inadequate." And I think that's also, the weird is a really good example of why in this book, Mark Fisher uses H.P. Lovecraft as a strong example of his concepts, because like in H.P. Lovecraft stories, right? His protagonists never encounter monsters right away, usually. Instead, they find like evidence of them, you know? They will come into contact with some like weird archaeological object, right? And there'll be like an idol or something, and they're like, this the thing depicted on this idol is so bizarre and weird. I have no idea what to make of this, and I'm compelled to investigate further because I now have to reconcile this thing with my former worldview.
Oh, what a simple effect done for great. Like, just have some dry ice and have a light inside the side of the geode we can't see, but like it works so well. I
It
love
does really convey the magic of this thing. But yeah, to go back to H.P. Lovecraft, like his characters will do this thing where, they will go on this quest to find answers. And what they will find instead is that the further along they get, they realize that the former like worldview they were trying to adjust in order to account for this object was actually some sort of like merciful delusion that they were indulging in. And that, obviously if you had a true idea of what the cosmos was really like, you would, end up in a state of psychosis or go, crazy or whatever. So the revelation destroys them. The same plot mechanics are kind of here in this movie, right? We have these kids, they find this magic geode thing, like you just said. It has these shiny magic lights and smoke come out of it when they open it.
But you're a kid, you accept it. You're just like, I guess
it's a kid's version of that Lovecraft plot mechanic.
Yeah.
And they're like, of course, if you found this shit as a kid, you'd want to explore the hole more. You'd be like, I want to see if there's more of these fucking thunder egg things. These are awesome. The interesting thing about those plot mechanics, though, is that the gate kind of twists it and it recontextualizes what it means to have had a worldview that was destroyed by this encounter with something from outside. Whereas in H.P. Lovecraft stories, it is usually like an internal subjectivity. It is the mind of the person investigating that is destroyed. In the gate, it doesn't destroy the kids. It says the former worldview that is being destroyed by this encounter with something otherworldly is suburbia itself. Suburbia is like the delusional bubble that they exist in that keeps them safe. And if they want to reach some sort of truth or answers, they have to learn to go beyond it. And of course, the movie doesn't have a sour ending like an H.P. Lovecraft story. It says this is a good thing. It's like, and suburbia remains destroyed at the end. It's like we have to be able to move beyond this.
Well, this says as white as a H.P. Lovecraft story.
There's no black people in this, although they do try to. The closest thing this gets to like not having white people is they try to like dig a hole to China. That's it.
Oh my God. I still find it hard to believe that at this high school party, everybody would be focusing on ghost stories and a thing to make them levitate.
I mean, for me, when I bring stuff like that up, it becomes a nitpick because I think the movie communicates tone and atmosphere.
No,
so
I completely 100% agree. Like, it's not important to the...
And it's not like a legitimate critique. Like I was going to ask you, like, did you actually have that as a critique where you were like, what the fuck is going on with this party? Or were you just like, that's funny? Because I don't think it's really legitimate critique. I think the movie is deliberately not focused on this sort of thing.
Oh, no, 100%. Yeah. And it's like I said, it's how a child views high school parties. Like, this is what you do. You do forbidden stuff. You do a grown-up stuff and scary stuff that you don't understand.
Yeah, he has no social context.
Yes, he doesn't know any of these people other than the clown sisters.
Yeah. I mean, even still, I would say, like, I don't think necessarily that kids view high school interactions as seances.
No, but like it's weird stuff you don't understand more.
Sure. And like you're saying, the emotional logic is more important for the consequences too. It's not important what they were doing. It's important that he embarrassed himself in front of them, or he feels like he embarrassed himself. And in reality, if you got fucking levitated, I don't even know how you'd respond to that. And also, like, these high schoolers are like, oh, this fucking baby, he levitated into a light bulb that exploded.
And then, yeah, continued to float through the entire fucking room.
If nothing else, if I was the sister, I'd be so pissed.
It's just an illusion. Yeah, no, if I was the sister, I'd just be like, I told you guys you could fucking come over if you didn't break anything. That's the one rule.
I don't care if it was an illusion. Yeah. Tell me the fucking light bulb that's broken is that an illusion?
Is the money you owe me an illusion?
Oh, man.
No, I'd like, at a real high school party, I would imagine one guy who's really into the ghost story telling it, and then a couple of stoners sitting there just being like, yeah.
Yeah, man. Oh, man, she's dead? Oh, my God. Now, we've talked...
It's not that I cried. It's I've levitated into a fucking glass bulb.
But again, in the logic of the movie, it is that he cried. Now, Max, we've talked about Stephen Dorff as a kid. Let's talk about him as an adult.
Do we have to?
Because let's not forget, he is the motherfucker who tried to ice skate uphill, as we all know.
He did have those frosted tips in Blade.
He was in Blade, and I haven't seen him in anything else, I don't think.
Oh, God. What was the other one he was in? There was one that, like, I think it was his last... Oh, my God. I'm gonna have to look this up. I should have been more just like, what's going on with Stephen Dorff?
Was he on an episode of True... He was in a season of True Detective.
Sure.
When that was, like, Prestige TV. And that was, like, a thing where it's like, oh, here's Stephen Dorff again.
Oh, he's still in... Okay, he's in, like, one-word action movies now. He was in a movie called Embattled, a TV show called Deputy. Okay.
He's working with Steven Seagal.
I would watch that. I'd be fine with that. Oh, he was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Leatherface thing. Oof, he's gone downhill. That's sad.
Who did he play in that?
That's a good question.
It would be funny
he played
if
a Texas Ranger in that movie.
Oh, man. It would be funny if he played Franklin. Just rolling around. Being irritating as fuck. Oh, man, I love this shit with the shadow play with all the kids' toys in his bedroom. It's so delightful. Hopefully this would go without saying, but this movie is just incredibly beautiful. It's just very colorful in a way that I appreciate. There are very few moments throughout the movie where I feel like the lighting resembles anything that could be called naturalistic or, truly unobtrusive. It looks very definitively like an 80s movie, using noticeable studio lighting techniques from the time. However, I think it does have a very nice color palette, and it just looks very nice. I think particularly a lot of the softer lighting sequences, usually when they're indoors, it just looks very beautiful. And this is also another scene where you can see that.
I'm trying to find more, like... There was one Stephen Dorff movie I could have sworn was just like, oh, this is fucking terrible.
I didn't mean to bring us down the Stephen Dorff rabbit hole here.
No, but like the only other things that like adult Stephen Dorff I was in I can think of that like besides Blade that I enjoyed was Cecil B. Demented, but I'm not gonna die for that movie. I'm not gonna say it's absolutely fucking great.
But you are gonna get some tattoos from it, aren't you?
Yes, of course. I'm gonna get a "Would you set your hair on fire for our movie" tattoo.
Is that not I've never seen Cecil B. Demented, but is that not the movie with all the director tattoos?
Yeah. Oh my God.
If that I would get those tattoos.
Cecil B. Demented is like, it's not even in the top 5 best John Waters movies. Might not even be in the top 10, but it is very much a sort of sloppy, this is my experience of fucking hating Hollywood and what they've done to the film industry.
And the last time we brought up Cecil B. Demented in a big way was a long time ago, Max. It was in our Toby Dammit episode.
Yeah.
So you can all go and check that out. It's another spooky Halloween movie made by an Italian. The Italians need support. We're recording this one day after the anti-Italian racism that is the Mario casting announcement.
Oh my God. I was just laughing my head off when that happened because like I'm not gonna see it. I didn't see the Sonic movie. I play the video games if you like the video games, but that whole fucking debacle of just like, we know we've had the same guy voicing almost every character in Mario for the past 30 years. But have you heard of Chris Pratt?
Yeah. I would feel bad for that guy if he had not also voiced Mario for the past 30 years, which is like probably one of the most lucrative things you could possibly do. Unless they have him like in a fucking cage somewhere. And it's like no money for you.
Shigeru Miyamoto just keeps him under his desk and lets him out whenever they need to voice a character. Okay, we need you to go, wahoo!
Yeah, and then they send him right back. Which could be possible. I mean, I don't know. One thing we didn't mention with the passing of the dog here
Aw.
This is one of those rare movies where it actually appreciates the gravity of the dog dying, and it treats the dog's death with respect. But one of the interesting things is how Terry is right on scene when the dog dies and is in fact embracing it. And I like the idea that the movie is momentarily raising this question of, again, connecting to the moral panic with heavy metal music is like, is this kid Terry lashing out, and did he like hurt the dog without realizing it, or somehow in this semi-dream awake state, you know? But then it immediately moves past that and once again says, no, Terry is just a kid, and he's not a violent kid, and he's not even expressing these emotions he's struggling to deal with in a violent way. He's just accessible to the demons in the same way that these other two kids are, because kids got their own shit to deal with, and Terry has certainly not solved all his own problems as well.
Oh no, 100%. I love that Stephen Dorff has finally taken matters into his own hand.
Well, I fucking would if the dog dies. I mean, it's ridiculous. Until they like coerce this idiot man who just walked in to try to bring the dog to, I don't even know where, the mortuary.
He takes it to the neighbor's house, which is the weirdest fucking thing.
You mean first or at the end?
Well, because he goes to like the neighbor's house and he's like ringing the doorbell, and then he looks across the fence and sees the big hole and pallet and is just like, oh, I guess I'll put it there.
Oh, I didn't think that was the neighbor's house. I think he's going to the mortuary. It's closed. And then he goes back to their house. He's ringing the doorbell and he doesn't hear them.
Okay.
So he's like, okay. But until then, they didn't even have a solution for like getting rid of the body. It's like, you're just going to leave the dog's body there until like 3 days from now when your parents show up? That's fucking weird. If a dog died, you got to call your parents.
Yeah. If the family dog dies, you think like, I know the sister's like, no, I need to convince the parents that like I'm responsible and we can do this, so I can do this more. I'm a teenager, but like, if the family dog dies and you don't tell them until they get back, they're going to be way more mad at you than
and suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's a big deal. But again, I just don't have a problem with it because of the way the movie has established it.
I'm not saying it's a flaw, but like I do, like, I understand her teenage logic of just like, no, we just have to ignore it. We can't because if we tell them the dog died, then they'll be home and I can't go out with my friends. And it's just like,
yeah, like, again, it is worth bringing up though, because it is something in a different movie that might be like, that's stupid. Whereas in this movie, it's about maintaining the absence of the parents because we know and we understand that it's not about them.
yeah.
And here we have this great moment where Terry puts two and two together. This is the thing.
Is that the Cramps in the background?
Yeah, that is the Cramps. You got the Cramps and Iron Maiden.
I wouldn't call the Cramps metal, but okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them metal either, but he's got decent taste.
And it's a good looking album cover to have on the
Yes.
poster of. I'll say that.
Yes.
Listen,
I'm honestly surprised you didn't notice that sooner.
I watched this twice on my laptop screen, and it's much smaller and grainier. On the laptop
and it
screen.
is buried under other like stickers
Yeah.
and stuff. But yes, that was the moment where Terry puts two and two together and realizes that the heavy metal album from Sacrifix is saying, "Hey, here are the instructions to close the gate to
And
hell."
I know teenagers are assholes, but like, I really want these teenage girls to die after this scene. They're like, the fucking dog died. Get over it, you piece of shit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely these two teenage friends and then man are the most, and by man, I don't mean dad. I mean man too.
Yes.
I mean boy. Man too, boy. I guess every boy is a sequel to their own father, aren't they? Anyway, that's its own side conversation. Man too, boy here. He is the most...
the worst. The worst pop group.
The worst boy
Hip-hop
band.
Of all time.
Man to boy.
Just singular. Just one guy.
Oh, God. He's the most cartoonish character in this movie, by far. And sometimes it's entertaining, and other times it's just like, get out of here.
Eric, you'll take this dead dog to the animal shelter, right?
Like, I appreciate that he's enough of an idiot to be like, yeah, I'll
You'll fuck me after I do that, right?
yeah, I'll take this dog to the fucking fires of Mount Doom, and then he'll fuck me, right?
At least got a hand job.
Even Frodo got a hand job.
I know you can't do it alone, Mr. Frodo. Oh, God.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie does share a lot of similarities with Lord of the Rings, which we'll get into later.
It is great to just see the ambition of it, too. Like, that's another thing that I really appreciate about this movie compared to Poltergeist, which, again, we're both fans of, but this movie actually has, like, its ambition far surpasses Poltergeist and what it's actually trying to show.
I would agree with that 100%.
It's like the end of the world. And they actually managed to, like, contextualize it in a way where it's like, yeah, this does look like the end of the world. You don't see consequences all over the world. You just see it in this local, this block or two of this suburban space. But, it does feel like it. It does feel real. Now, Max, going back to a point you brought up when you were talking about why didn't they bring the parents back? I want to talk about the absence of the parents and what it adds to this movie. And I'm going to go back to the book again. And
I wasn't complaining about it at all, but keep going.
I didn't think you were. I think it's worth elaborating on because it's an interesting part. And it's something that's going to show up in a lot of other horror movies in less explicit ways, a lot of other teen-centric horror movies from this time. But this one highlights it in a way that I think reveals interesting things about it. Now, I'm connecting it to the other side of this coin in this book, which Mark Fisher talks about, which is the eerie. And Mark Fisher writes about the eerie. He writes, a sense of the eerie seldom clings to enclosed and inhabited domestic spaces. We find the eerie more readily in landscapes partially emptied of the human. What happened to produce these ruins, this disappearance? What kind of entity was involved? What kind of thing was it that emitted such an eerie cry? As we can see from these examples, the eerie is fundamentally tied up with questions of agency. What kind of agent is acting here? Is there an agent at all? Later on in the book, he writes, the eerie concerns the most fundamental metaphysical questions one could pose. Questions to do with existence and non-existence. Why is there something here when there should be nothing? Why is there nothing here when there should be something? Max, I'm going to jump to a completely unrelated thing to provide another example of the eerie. Do you remember when you open the gates, you step into Yarnum for the first time, and you're like, wow, what a beautiful...
Somebody put a penny in the Dark Souls jar, everybody.
This is the From Software corner. You step into that space and you're like, what a beautiful domestic, Victorian Gothic city or whatever. And then the first thing you see is like, why the fuck are there no people? That's the eerie.
Yes.
And it's the question that's going to drive you. And it is something that happens a lot from software stuff because it's like, where the fuck are the people in this? And often the answer is like they got transformed into something frightening.
To all our listeners out there, I have never beaten a Dark Souls game, but
you did beat Bloodborne.
I did beat Bloodborne,
which is definitely harder than Dark Souls 1.
I disagree with that, but this isn't a video game podcast, thank God.
Yeah. It's only the second most obnoxious type of podcast.
Yes.
But I do think that is a very solid example of the eerie because it's something you palpably feel in those games, and it's probably something our listeners have maybe experienced on their own. And again, something that happens in H.P. Lovecraft stuff as well. I think of like At the Mountains of Madness, right? They show up in a deserted city under Antarctica and it's completely empty. And you're like, where did all the fucking people go? Right? And those are the questions of agency. It's like, what is happening? Where is everyone? And the way it relates back to
I'm surprised this kid didn't just leave the dog at the door of the animal place.
Yeah, he could have brought it anywhere else other than in the girl's own backyard. He literally just gave up. But Max, the reason the eerie relates back to the gate is because I connect that absence of the parents with that eerie sensation, right? Where it's like, it's not just that there's no parents in this world. We don't see any adults at all. They're just not a part of the movie. Once the parents leave, they're gone. They're completely gone.
Yes.
And I think it, again, in the same way that the gate offers a twist on like that bubble of delusion that is pierced by the weird object entering it, I think the gate uses the eerie to recontextualize this suburban space where it's like, it makes you question the agency of like the things that would inhabit the suburban space and why these kids are here when there should be other things as well.
Oh my God. I love that. It's just like, just write metal and spray paint on a thing. But you buy it in this movie because he's a kid and he's like, that's heavy metal.
It's the kid logic. And also it's just like, It is kind of refreshing to get a movie where it's like, okay, instead of it, this is the complete opposite of like the RLM Bagul problem situation, where it's like instead of providing an utterly stupid and literal explanation of how to defeat the demons, we're going to actually have people use creativity to arrive at their own conclusion in a way that's kind of charming.
And I know this has been discussed before, but like I love how much of a dork he is.
Yes.
Because like they always try to portray like metalheads in 80s movies as
Nope.
like super cool, like
Nope.
punk people.
They're fucking nerds.
No. As somebody who listens to a shit ton of industrial metal, let me tell you, most people who are into metal are fucking dweebs, and I love this is the
Yes.
most like accurate representation of a young metal fan in the world.
Especially metal people who are kids.
Yeah.
It's like are definitely the biggest dorks in the world.
Well, that I not to get too much into my own personal history, but that's what first like drove me to goth stuff when I was younger.
Yes.
Where I'm just like, oh, I can be a nerd and like dress like the people cartoons tell me are cool. That sounds great. And
Yeah. Definitely there's a lot of, overlap and like continuation between like the punk crowd of the 70s and then the metal crowd of the 80s and then the goth crowd of the 90s. I would say there's a lot
Oh,
of
100%.
yeah.
And it continued on to emo, and
then, well,
Gen Z's having their own emo moment right now. I don't think they've invented a genre to take it over yet, but we'll get there. And the classic of playing the record backwards.
the backward masking, the 1980s most important thing to have in your heavy metal horror movie. If it doesn't have backward masking, what are you even doing? I mean, come on now. It is legitimately crazy that, like, at the time this movie was released, if you had a copy of, like, The Evil Dead in the UK, you could get arrested and sent to prison. That's so mind-boggling to me.
Oh, God.
I don't even know how the UK, like, got more extreme than the US on, like, any single authoritarian awful thing.
I mean, being trans in the UK is worse right now. It's fucking abysmal over
Is
there.
it legitimate? I have such little faith in the US.
I know, but like, you know how shittily we treat trans people over here? It's even worse in the UK.
Yeah.
I did it. Time to go get that hand job.
I really love that cut too, because it just compresses the entire thing with as little effort or thought as he put into it.
Yes.
You know what else is interesting about that, though? And that character's involvement in doing this, Max, is that when you think about it, every single character was kind of needed and involved in opening the gate.
Yeah.
There's actually no fat on this. We say that the character is stupid and cartoonish, but he actually does contribute to opening the gate in the tangible
All
way.
of them do.
Even the dog.
Yeah. The dog is the sacrifice. The kid lets blood on there. The teenagers levitate him.
Yes.
It's all the little steps. There is no fat on this movie.
And again, that's why I think this movie really speaks to the uncanny, the eerie, and the weird, because those are all concepts that really can help, like, explain certain things. The idea of like a fabric with certain things peeking through in a horror movie, right? All those concepts can help you contextualize horror movies that rely on like some facade of normalcy that's being breached occasionally before something is repressed back, and then the breaches become too numerous or too large and it breaks through entirely, or breaks through even like literally with a hole in the ground.
Yeah.
And I do think that's like a strong trope of movies that are horror movies that take place in suburbia. There's like often this thing, again, referring back to Poltergeist, there's a thing of like the physical space has to be like breached or punctured by some other world in a specific way.
Aww. This is the moment that stops the sister from like being too irredeemable. Because like you could have this moment later on where she's just like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this. I just wanted to have friends. But like, no, she did get what she wanted. She got to go to the mall with her friends. But like she realizes that her brother's going through a tough time and she should probably do the things they used to love to do together.
Yep. And like we're saying, this is the type of thing that prevents the movie from being moralizing. Because if she doesn't do it, then you could have idiots reading into this, like, not idiots reading into it because the movie would be encouraging it, but it's
simplistic
like, yeah,
reading of this movie.
where it's like, hey, she wasn't cool. Now she's got to be eaten.
She was being punished for her sins. She was experimenting with adult stuff and might have had sex with the dude that awkwardly put his arm around her. So
Yeah.
she needs to die now.
Whereas with this, it's very clearly like it's much more emotionally mature and complex because it's like you can be a good person and it doesn't matter because your character is not related to your ability to grow and mature. Everyone has to change and everyone has to confront things that are going to be challenging to them.
Demons aren't going to ring the doorbell. That sounds like one of those fucking what was it? One of those like kids like series of just like ghosts don't make cafeteria.
Oh, like a Goosebumps series?
It's not Goosebumps, but like there was a series of like books that were just like ghouls don't teach algebra or something like that.
Oh, about teaching algebra.
It was just like a bunch of like school kid mystery things, and I think the twist every time was just like, don't judge people that look differently than you.
Oh, okay.
But that feels like it. Demons don't ring doorbells. Definitely feels like it.
I want to say that I just noticed that for the first time somehow. That was a very weird edit. That like flip transition. That was weird. I think that's the only time in the movie they do that. Where it looked like a goddamn video toaster flip transition from like 1987. They got rockets all over the place. In this
Yeah,
house.
so many rockets. Thunderbolt.
It's not just rockets, but like space stuff is a motif that constantly reappears throughout this movie. What?
The one I know this is the 80s and whatnot. This is the second time we've used the actually offensive F word throughout.
Oh,
this.
the F word.
Yeah. It's done in a strange way, and I know it was much more popular in the 80s, but like
I just like the idea of like people discussing it as it's like popular.
yeah, but like I know it was used more in the 80s, and I'm not just being like cancel the movie, but it is one of the things that just sort of sticks out as like that's all. But it's I have never heard as a bi dude, I have never heard fagging off before. I've never heard that term.
It does sound like a kid trying extra hard to be insulting and then just making it weird.
Yeah.
I love this.
I do really want that prop.
That drawing is silly.
That's great though. That's what makes it even better.
You look up clip art of like man cut to pieces by imps.
It's the first result.
Yeah. I will say there's this commentary track is very funny because all the people making this are like, oh man, we didn't prepare for this at all. And then it's just them like trying to just remember everything. And then they'll remember something and then he'll be like, oh, I always hated that drawing I did. It is interesting how many, oh my God, the first imp is here.
Oh boy.
I love how they do the shadow play. You're like, oh man, is this going to be a Muppet or what's going to happen here? And you're like, I'm about to see something very special. But I do think it's interesting how frequently, also as just another motif, in addition to the space motif that recurs constantly, there's a lot of moments where you're like looking at pictures of things, whether there's of families or other stuff, which is also interesting.
And that family photo comes back later, and like you don't even realize it's being foreshadowed for anything.
Yeah, just like in the first scene with the doll in the treehouse.
Yeah,
he's gonna see that at the end, and I don't know what it means, but it is foreshadowed. So there you go. Now, Max, this is a probably good moment to talk about some of the iterations that this movie went through and some of the other things.
Yes, you were telling me about this, and apparently it was supposed to be much, much different.
Yes, well, this scene that's coming up in particular, with the electricity going off because it seems like it's attracting a shitload of bugs. Again, a very uncanny representation of the horror that is about to occur. Originally, there was supposed to be just like a big-ass Mothman that was supposed to explode through the window.
It was deemed too erotic, and they had to cut it out of the movie.
Obviously.
Everybody wants to fuck Mothman.
So there was supposed to be a Mothman here. Again, very erotic, goes without saying. But also, there were a number of other changes. We already mentioned that it was supposed to be two brothers instead of a brother and a sister. That was a change made by Tibor Takacs. I don't know if we mentioned that earlier, but that's how he pronounced his name. It's not Takacs. even though that's how you want to say it. But Tibor, we'll call him, was the one who said, let's have it be a brother and a sister, which I appreciate because it's just a little bit more interesting, a little bit more memorable than the two brothers. But also, the two brothers were supposed to be more devious. It was supposed to be a more moralizing movie about them getting what they deserve. Speaking of the moths, one of the other iterations that this movie went through is that the siblings were supposed to pick the wings off these moths. It's one of the evil things that they do that they then get like a righteous punishment for. But also, one of the other big changes, there's supposed to be like a fucking bloody armed like mutant monster instead of the demon lord at the end.
Oh, poor dog.
And that dog thing is not like viscerally frightening, but again, it is kind of very
monster under the bed hands. Just everything about this sequence is done so well, in my opinion.
Well, it's like it's shifting up different types of scares. And again, like why that dog is scary, it's not just that it's the dog in the bed, it's that it has this weird like death face with its tongue out and its eyes are like bulging.
But even more than that, like we didn't talk about this much, but like this movie does play on, I love that. I love that the hand can extend farther than like the immediate area around the bed. But it's playing on childhood fears. Like every kid, if you have a dog, like the dog fucking dying in front of you is like one of the worst fucking fears you can have imaginable.
And just the proximity to it.
The monster under the bed that like can grab you if you don't like get a running start and jump onto your bed in the dark. Like, I love that long extending hand because it plays on that fear perfectly.
And it's like, again, it's shifting up different means of scaring you where the hand is like a cheesy thing, but then it comes right after this other thing in a way that kind of catches you off guard.
Yes.
And then they switch it up immediately here where it's like, oh, they see the parents and it's this weird psychological thing where it's like, that's not my parent. And then he touches the dad's face and then like disgusting yellow milk pours out. And it's like this, it's not gore, but it's like
it's
gross.
Disturbing.
Yeah.
It's a real ramp up for this movie.
Everything that is scary in this movie, that not everything that's scary, but like it has all happened in the last 2 minutes.
Yes.
So you have this burst of these different means of scaring the audience. I think that makes the movie very effective. And it's a great way to like communicate like the rest of the movie is different now. We've built up to the moment where the demons are going to attack, and that's going to be the remainder of the movie.
I will say, if I have to ding this movie anywhere,
okay,
I don't think the teenage girlfriend should be here. They don't really serve a purpose. And the arc for the sister that they represent later on, I think would have been better served if they weren't here. And they show up late and they're like, come on, we were supposed to have a beach party tonight. Why aren't you coming?
Yeah.
And then she was just like, I've got real shit to deal with. Fuck off.
Yes, as much as it is interesting the way in which even the pieces that feel cartoony and superficial at the beginning actually play into opening the gate, they do just sequester these two girls into a closet and they don't have anything to do with closing the gate.
No. And then the second it gets fucking like the second they think the demons are over, they're like, let's go party now. Like they're not psychologically damaged by this at all.
Yes.
It that like I'm fine with the teenagers being cut out cardboard stereotypes for this movie in particular because they serve for what the child sees them as. But
they don't feel integrated.
Yes. They're not integrated in the scene. They don't really serve a purpose. So have them show up afterwards. Oh, they're
Maxx.
great. They're great. They're great.
This is the first moment. This shot right here.
Yeah.
It's the first forced perspective. And we see the imps. I love these guys so much.
I know you do.
Now, Maxx, that forced perspective is just, I mean, it goes without saying, but like, it's amazing. This is not forced perspective. This shot, this is, or actually it might have been. That is forced perspective.
That's forced perspective, but I believe some of them are matted in, some of it, like that we have stop animation here.
Do you see the thing is they use everything. They use the forced perspective. They use the stop motion animation. They use, matte shots occasionally with tracking mats. Another similarity this movie has with, Lord of the Rings is just throwing everything at the
every
audience.
trick in the book. Yeah.
So it really works because it makes you unsure of what effect is being used at any specific moment. And because they all look good, it really sells the reality of these things. But the forced perspective stuff in particular is like, it really is like just unbelievably incredible. And they made it exactly the way that you just think that they would make that sort of thing, where it's like, they built a platform where they had the actors on to raise above this set, and then they had the people in the imp outfits just being that's a great moment with the phone catching on fire and the melting.
Yeah.
It's so good. But they had the actors in the imp outfits like 40 feet away. They worked out the math, and then they had props with the imp actors that were scaled up to make it look like the imp actors were small, and that's how they did it. It's like very simple. However, they did say that like filming it was very tense because you have these people up on this high platform, and you can't add railings or anything. It has to be very secure so it doesn't shake either.
Yeah.
And they have to act with the confidence as if there's not like empty air and like a 30 feet drop right around them. So it is a little bit nerve-wracking to do, and perhaps not the most safe way to do it, but it does look incredible.
I do love how jaded Steven Dorff has become immediately. Or like he sees this shit and he's just like, yeah, don't worry about it. The demon's up to bullshittery again.
Yeah. That's the funny thing about this, right? To go back to comparing it to like H.P. Lovecraft plot mechanics. The thing, according to this movie, that all those H.P. Lovecraft archaeologist protagonists were missing that would have prevented them from going insane was viewing everything they were seeing through the ideology of a metal album. They had only had a metal album. They would have had all the answers. Which is, again, an interesting thing with this movie. Some of the heavy metal horror movies do pull this trick where they subvert the moral panic about metal. And it's like, yes, metal bands know about Satan, but more importantly, they know how to stop him.
Yes, they would have been fucked without the knowledge that is bequeathed to them by this wonderful album of the people who all died in a plane crash after making one album.
Yes. And then, of course, in the other really notable example of that with Trick or Treat, it's also a very complex relationship where it's like he does the backward masking and it like tells him how to fight his bully at school. And it's like a very important, meaningful thing for him. And then, of course, it's complicated by the fact that Sammy Kerr himself is evil. Another flip transition. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Trick or Treat is also really good. I know they did that on Best of the Worst, but that is legitimately not as bad as you would expect from a Best of the Worst movie.
Oh, I thought you were saying Trick or Treat. I like that movie.
I'm saying the heavy metal Trick or Treat movie from the 80s, not
Trick or Treat.
Michael Dougherty.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's
also a good movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not quite Gateway Hoarder, little too gory for that, but still a great movie.
One of the few like even like not bad anthology horror movies to have been made in the last 20 years.
100.
Almost every other single anthology horror movie in the last 20 years has been not good.
Anthology movies, like, a lot of the times they just seem like, we had 3 ideas and none of them really worked out. Let's just cut them out of short films and fucking release it. Who cares?
Or you make YouTube videos and you do ABCs of death and it's like, here's 2 minutes. It's like, all right, fuck off.
Yeah.
Now this is really great. The other interesting stuff about the special effects here, Max, is they had an opportunity to straight up build. Max, do you think that's special effects?
I mean, it looks like it is, but I'm assuming it's not.
Nope. They just, Max, okay, this is so amazing. I never would have guessed this either. They had the opportunity when they were building the hole that is the gateway to hell. They were like, let's just build a fucking deep hole in the ground. And they did. And you know what else they did, Max? They kind of did like a honeycomb thing, is my understanding. So they could have lights down there and they could do special effects coming out of it, and they could have equipment that is not straight down in the hole, but on the side, so you can't see it. One of the interesting things they did was they basically put a bunch of fans down there and managed to make the hole like a vacuum, and they could suck shit into it for real.
That's wow.
And it looks amazing. That is real. That is real. Everyone thinks it's a special effect, and I absolutely thought it was a special effect until I learned that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love this. I would love if these were real animals. These imp things.
I mean, they're basically just shittier naked mole rats.
I also love how like Terry is not sure if they're bad. right away, and he tries to say hello to them. Oh, it's so... I just love these imps. They're so cute. Again, more really fantastic, forced perspective here.
Yeah, we get one that's a puppet.
I mean, that might even be some of the best forced perspective with
Yeah.
that one cut where they're tugging on his leg, or this.
Yeah, that one.
And the other thing about that too, that usually throws people off because they're not used to seeing forced perspective like this, is that they're like, how are they like panning and tilting the camera? Oh, here's that great moment where he steps on it and he freaks out.
That's a fucking seizure.
Yeah. Also probably worth noting that like they shot these imp dudes in 12 frames per second.
Yes.
To make their movement look a little bit more believably unnatural and hide the fact there was people in suits.
Yes, which is interestingly gave me the false impression it would stop animation.
Again, it's just since they're using everything
and
they're using it well, you confuse everything, and it actually makes it so much better. But the really impressive thing about the way they were able to pan and tilt is that they had this very special camera tripod head, which they called like a nodal pan and tilt tripod. And essentially the idea is this, Max. You know how on like a drawing or a painting that's trying to teach you perspective, there's like a vanishing point?
Yeah.
So the idea with these nodal point tripod heads is that as long as you rotate or pan or tilt the camera in reference to that specific nodal point, the objects in the foreground and the background will not change perspective. So that's how they were able to move the camera, because they identified that point using mathematics, and they said we're going to pan and tilt around this one point. And then it looked consistent. And it's amazing because it's
it's just for one quick shot to like establish the imps down there.
They do it a few times.
I know, I'm just saying, but like in general, you have to do all that work
for the effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For that one quick thing, and it works great.
But the thing is, it like fucks with you throughout it, because you're so used to seeing forced perspective that's like you can't change where the camera is, because then you mess it up, you know? That's also why the forced perspective works so well in Lord of the Rings, is because they do a lot of the same stuff.
Oh, I love this.
Oh.
Yeah, fuck it. I don't know what to read from the Bible. Let's just throw it like a fucking grenade.
And then it behaves like a grenade.
Saying The Exorcist would be a much shorter movie if we just worked like that.
If they just like put duct tape on Reagan's mouth. They're like, can you just stop?
Oh, God. I'll just throw a Bible in there and blow her up. It's like, okay.
You were supposed to exorcise the kid, not murder it.
I did both.
And here we have our false resolution.
Which kind of like very clearly is not a resolution. Like, you know, something's still up.
Yeah, you actually mentioned you mentioned what the two other friend girls said after they get rid of the demon threat.
Yeah.
And for me, watching this movie, that's like part of why I'm like certain that it's not over.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it before, but also it's like, of course it's not over, because the weird dream-like incongruity of them being like, are you ready to party? After the demon explosion is like, oh, you're still... Something weird is still going on. What a nice house. I don't know if I mentioned this yet on the commentary track, but according to the filmmakers, this house was kind of built and modeled after, apparently, John Ford's house.
Congrats to John Ford. He seems to have a lovely place to live.
To get drunk in.
They weren't drinking. One of them had a joint, I think. That was it. They were letting the dog eat the bowl of chips. I don't think that was even a joint. I think they were just smoking cigarettes.
You're talking about the teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah. John Ford getting drunk all the time.
Oh, yeah. That goes without saying, but...
It'd be anti-Irish racism to say he's not getting drunk all the time, frankly. I do like that the girl is trying to make a cross out of the two knives. And they took the garlic.
Party time.
Honestly, Max, if you killed demons and you thought you shut the gate to hell, what would you do after?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely time for a shit ton of drugs.
At the very least, you're going to tweet about it.
No, I don't tweet about my life. What if like they stabbed one of these boys?
Oh, who just jumped out of the closet to try
Yeah.
to be surprising. I don't know. That would be funny. That would be cool. I mean, I don't know if they deserve it, but they are boring.
Yeah.
And I think that's enough, in my opinion.
I can take a hint. Jesus Christ. Because, like, yeah, what you're saying, it would make more sense if, like, we didn't get this scene afterwards of, like, them actually doing it. Because, like, it would make kind of sense if, like, the daughter's friends were, like, the parents and just weird milk people trying to, like, trick them into doing things again. But then we have to have this extended sequence of, like, nope, everything's fine. That's why the movie's still going.
I do think it's interesting too how the like window remains conspicuously broken. Like it seems like a lot of the stuff that happened kind of has reversed course and it seems like it's not there. But the window remains broken. And the rest of the damage from this point on in the movie will actually remain after the true conclusion, which is interesting. Again, this movie has a slightly more pessimistic view of suburbia. Actually, much greater pessimistic view of suburbia than Poltergeist, which is much more explicitly about like how suburbia is related to some sort of geopolitical project. But then it really reconciles that and like dances away from the conclusions in the very last moment because it's a sentimental Spielberg movie. Oh God, here comes the dead zombie man out of the walls.
Yeah, calling back to early on in the movie when Glenn was just making up bullshit.
Yep.
Not
and
Glenn. Terry, sorry.
Terry, yes.
Terry Glenn. Yeah, whatever.
Wide receiver.
Boy,
Terry Glenn.
Glenn Terry. Accountant.
What?
I don't know. We're just saying names and orders and professions. I do like that Terry admits he's like, no, I was just making up bullshit.
Yeah.
That's not real.
It still comes back. But the thing is, there's no way to fake the interactions with the demons. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it was fake. It's like, well, it's still coming back. And it takes them away. And to very disturbing consequences. Terry gets turned into a little mole rat, man.
Is that actually supposed to be Terry, you think? Or is that another, like, illusion type thing? I don't know. It doesn't really matter in the long term, in the grand scheme of things, but...
Yeah, I don't know. I think it is maybe supposed to be more Terry because the illusions are more closely resembling the thing they're copying. Whereas Terry is not resembling real Terry, but he looks like a transformed Terry.
I think they just took the glasses off. That's all that matters.
Nah, they gave him the rat teeth.
That's just his normal teeth. You just haven't seen them the entire movie.
Okay.
The big glasses distract you from his horrifying rat teeth. Listen, son, Terry might be a little weird. His mother passed away and his father doesn't love him because he's a terrifying rat boy.
And they won't get him braces.
Is that supposed to be like the Eye of Horus, or...
I don't know. We see these symbols with the eye in the hand repeated throughout the movie. We saw it in like the fucking Sesame Street children's toy thing that gave them the magic words they said to usher in the demons like Evil Dead. And then we see it on the back of the metal album. That's how Terry makes the connection. And then we see it on the wall here written in blood. Whose blood? I don't know. And then of course, it literally occurs to Glenn here when he gets the Demon Lord's gift in a few minutes.
Which is an interesting choice.
Yeah. Can we also just say about this zombie guy? I think he is genuinely creepy looking and everything, but also like it's another one of those moments where like the movie is switching up what type of horror it's trying to do.
Oof. Oh,
The great transition.
Flawless effect.
For anyone who hasn't seen this, what happens is the zombie guy falls onto the floor and then like very seamlessly breaks apart into a bunch of the little imps who then dance around on the floor and chase our characters. That is one of the most, that's probably one of the most impressive force perspective, where you see them behind the door and then you have the moment where the girl kicks one as she shuts the door Oh, it's so good.
You did it. Glenn, hurry up.
This is like that scene in Jurassic Park where Glenn has to play the fucking stupid video game with the 1993 version of The Sims in order to like unlock a security passcode, get the gun.
It's a Linux system.
Oh, you're right.
That's how all Linux systems look. They look like an Atari game.
Yes. Yes. That's why it was so easy for
That's why
people to
Linux
use.
users are so insufferable. Because they're just like, you guys have to do all this fucking coding. We just play.
I just have everything in boxes.
We just
Look
play
at
a
this.
flight simulator and set up on my computer. Works great.
Oh man, here we go. I know this scene was the one moment where they had to actually dance around a few things with the ratings board, where Al stabs demonic Terry in the fucking eye with a Barbie doll leg.
Yeah.
And you see it. Most explicit violence in the movie, and it is quite something. Now, the Barbie doll is an interesting thing that relates back to the rocket toy that I have not brought up yet, but I think is interesting. My question throughout this is like, why a rocket? Why are they playing with this rocket toy? It is an interesting detail on its own. That's maybe a more interesting choice than just like, I don't know, Hot Wheels.
Well, it's something that they were used to do together. It's never explicit.
I know the plot reason why.
But I'm just saying, like, it's something I appreciate. It's never explicitly stated, but like you see photos and they both have matching jackets from when they used to compete and build these things. And there's a picture of them in the background with a trophy.
It's clear that it's the thing they do together. What
Yes.
I'm asking is, why did the filmmakers choose rocket making to be the thing? And I don't know if this was at all intentional, but I do think it is another example, like in Poltergeist, with the bodies under the plot of land. It is relating like this greater political reality to like the project of suburbia. And the idea of like, it reminds me of a passage from that Roland Barthes book I bring up all the time, Mythologies, where he really rails against this idea of children's toys being like occupations in miniature. And there's something interesting about that, about like this, U.S. military like Blackbird fighter jet they're launching, being like a miniaturized version of like the like part of the ideological goal that like suburbia serves, and then suburbia being the thing they destroy and grow out of. I don't know. I just find it interesting. I don't know how it lines up exactly, but
I don't know about that. I'm not sure, but I think the rocket building serves the dual purpose of representing their bond and therefore being able to be that pure-hearted light that needs to be destroyed, the demon lord. And it's just something you can shoot and something that is a wholesome family activity. If you want to read into it, into the event of the space age and how that destroys suburbia, that is a path you can go down. I'm not sure if that was intentional on the part of the filmmakers.
whether it's intentional or not, or whether
It's irrelevant.
it's
but
irrelevant. And also what we're saying are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
At all. This is my blatant attempt to draw some meaning from the fact of it being a rocket. And I do think it's there. I do think there is something. This movie is all about like the evil subtext of something like breaking through suburbia, right? And then them trying to use the rocket to defeat it, and that being a symbol of their relationship. I don't know exactly how it lines up, but there is certainly something connecting those two, because again, this vision of suburbia is very explicitly related to what we think of when we think of like the moral majority and the political ideology sweeping across America in the 80s.
at the time, yes.
Yeah. Although this is a Canadian movie. Something we didn't mention, this is one of those great Canadian movies from this time period, one of the great Canadian horror movies. They were making a lot of really interesting ones throughout the like 70s and 80s. Last one we did that was a Canadian horror movie from this time period would have been My Bloody Valentine. Another movie that is definitely wearing its like genre influences on its sleeve, but has some interesting changes and touches that make it special.
Another movie that we've done before, if you want to go listen to our commentary track for that. One of my favorite slasher movies of all time, actually. I really, really enjoy that. As somebody who's not a huge slasher fan, that if you're going to have a good old gimmick slasher movie, I think My Bloody Valentine is exactly what you need.
One day we'll get to all the holiday slasher things. We'll get to New Year's Evil. We'll get to Well, what are the other ones? Well, Halloween, obviously.
April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day. There you go.
Thanksgiving, the fake movie. I think the only one that didn't get turned into a real movie, the beginning of Grindhouse. But you don't remember that wonderful fake trailer at the beginning of Grindhouse?
No, although I
It's
do.
a guy dressed in a pilgrim outfit killing people with a knife. It's great.
That would be pretty good.
Thanksgiving. I mean, there was a turkey horror movie, but I think that was supposed to be like a parody of those types of movies. So who cares?
It was an asylum bullshit thing. I mean, those just don't even exist
Yeah.
to me. Oh, I love how they start dancing when the Demon Lord comes out. This is something we talked about in the preparation episode too. Like the imps, I think are like, I would say self-consciously silly. Like I think they're deliberately going for something unsettling, but also kind of silly.
Yeah.
They're derpy. The Demon Lord, however, while looking similar to the imps, is not silly at all. And I'm very impressed by that. He's very intimidating to me.
I like him. No, I do like how he has the same sort of fleshy tone and like skin texture as the imps. But yeah, the imps are very silly. This guy means business, and you can tell that instantly just by his design. It's great.
Yeah. And I also think this guy is interesting to look at like an alternate universe version of what Jurassic Park would have been, because the way they're animating his stop motion animation and then also adding like a conspicuous motion blur to imply his size when he moves was part of their original plan with how they were going to show the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. So this is potentially what that would have looked like, maybe.
Which
It looks good.
it looks good.
Not
but,
as
like,
good as Jurassic Park.
It's not Jurassic Park. This
No.
movie also had 1/1000th of the budget of Jurassic Park.
Yes.
So
And it is amazing what they accomplished with that. It's still, I would say this is still quite good.
okay, so
The
this moment, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, I was just going to say the only weakness I would say about this Demon Lord is when it's matted in.
Yeah,
That's the only conspicuous thing.
but I think this moment is rather important.
The Demon Lord giving the eyeball hand.
That too. That's important for the plot.
Oh, that's not what you're talking about.
No, I think I brought this up yesterday, but the structure of this movie as a child's nightmare is something that I find very important. And I think, yes, like as far as we know, like we've seen Terry get dragged away, we've seen the little sister get dragged away. There's no on-screen deaths in this movie.
No.
It's all implied, which I think is good. And the fact that like the big bad can be stopped by yelling like, "No, leave me alone." I think that's like very key in making this a movie that is digestible for children. Like it never gets too scary and never gets to the point where like they feel out of control in this world.
See, I have a subtle disagreement that I think has broad implications. I think I agree when you say that's what makes it digestible, but I also think that's what makes it more scary. Because children will understand it on their own terms and they'll absorb
Yes.
more of it. I don't think it makes it less scary. I think
It's a different kind of scary.
yes.
Or like after a certain point of like too scary, I think like your brain is just going to turn off as a child. And it's,
Yeah, it'll totally alienate you and you just won't interact with it. But again, the debate here is like, does that make something more scary?
Yeah.
Or does the ability to absorb all of it make it more scary? And
But
I don't know.
But it is digestible. Like the end
Yes,
of this movie, there's nobody
definitely.
dead. Even the dog is fine. Like,
Yeah.
and it ends on sort of a yuck ending of like, wow, how are we going to tell mom and dad about this?
Well, I think the thing I like about that, it's not quite that silly.
I know.
But I think the thing that I like about the way it resolves that is that it's actually not a cop-out because you see all the damage and stuff remains.
Yes.
It's everything happened. And also it's like, that was the point of it, is that this movie's about them moving past their like suburban bubble. And the idea of like, you know, their life as a childhood being this sheltered thing that they have to grow out of, you know, and associating that with their suburban home being like a fake shelter, a fake place that they need to get out of, you know, and explore other things and become different people. And I think that optimism is very appropriate and earned in this movie. And by the way, this is where Steven Dorff's acting like impresses me a lot, where he has to deliver the line, "The end of the world, hell on earth."
Yeah.
And he's like a 7-year-old. This is his first acting appearance. He does a great job. I wouldn't know how to direct a kid to say the line "hell on earth"
Yeah.
and be like, "All right, Steven, you're seeing hell on earth."
Action.
I mean, what was that? What would that even mean to a kid?
Oh my god. There's one story. I hate to bring Star Wars into this, but there's this one story on set that just like, okay, I'm gonna stop for this because
Do we want to talk about the eye hand? Because
great effect,
yeah,
interesting implications to the story. It's great that like the little kid gets marked by the demon and like
yeah.
everything leaves him alone after that. Like
If you're not watching this movie with us, what happens is the demon lord shows up, and like Max said, Steven Dorff yells at it, and it leaves him alone. But before doing that, what it does is it grabs his hand, and it seems like it's bestowing a gift upon him.
Yes.
Is the way the demon lord seems to behave, where it gives him an eyeball that opens on his hand. And it's related to that imagery we saw earlier on the album and everything, but it's like this thing that seems to indicate that he's like going to be like maybe an emissary for the demon lord, or like
because Steven Dorff realized earlier that like it was his actions that caused all this shit to
Yes.
happen, and because of that, he's the one who summoned the demons. As far as they're concerned, it's just like, oh, okay, this kid is the one who did it. Cool, he's the one who gets to live.
yes, and the demon lord is like, you were the one who did. Thank you.
Yeah,
Here's an eyeball on your hand. It's a really interesting that they chose to have a more nuanced relationship between him and the demon lord then.
it's interesting.
And it makes the demon lord's reappearance more scary because it's like, oh, I gave you a fruit basket and you took a shit on it, kid. And now I'm going to fuck you up.
Yeah, but as you were saying, because it's very hard to direct children to do what you want. I just remembered a story about like how terrible George Lucas was
Oh
at
my
directing
God.
it. And like during the filming of the prequels, there's that little kid who plays Boba Fett.
And
like
Ian McGregor have to direct him.
Yes, Ian McGregor. Yes, that's exactly what happened. Ian McGregor, like they had to do this like one take over and over and over again because they weren't like getting the kid to like portray the emotion they wanted to in his face. Ian McGregor like literally goes up to him at one point. He's like, "Okay, when you see me, I need you to make a face that like somebody ripped the most nasty fart you've ever smelled, but you can't do anything about it."
Yeah.
And they got that in one shot, and it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
have somebody who like understands human emotion direct to children.
George Lucas would be the type of person to just like make a kid feel terrible about
Yeah.
themselves, being like, you're the problem holding us up. And then try to describe their emotional reaction and like, I need you to think about the feeling when you're divorced. Can you do that for me, child?
When everybody says your wife is the only reason the first Star Wars movie is good. Think about that feeling. That's a relatable feeling.
Oh, here's the demon lord. I love the demon lord's eyes as
it's great.
well.
I love that he has random tentacles on the side too.
Yeah, he's very weird. And we actually never see his full size. He's just like a giant worm god. Very interesting. And then Steven Dorff launches the rocket at it, and it becomes very clear that the rocket itself is not nearly as important as like the intention.
No,
Which is what Terry set up earlier. He says you have to, destroy the demons with like an act of pure love or light or whatever.
yes to both of those.
Yeah, and the rocket itself does nothing, but again, it's the intention. And that's the thing that this movie is about, is that like there is no faking it, right? He has to do it in a way, he has to grow as a person to defeat the demon lord because that's what it requires.
Well, because earlier on he got that rocket launcher for his sister for their, oh my god,
the flipping.
the one bad effect in this movie.
The flipping Steven Dorff dummy.
But he got that like battery powered rocket launcher as a gift for his sister and then threw it away when he thought his sister didn't care about him anymore. But then he found out that she got that gigantic rocket for him and was planning on giving it to him as a birthday present. So it's combining their shared love and shared sibling passion together and using it to destroy the demon and have a wonderful 4th of July fireworks display afterwards.
Now, I would be careful with the phrase sibling passion. Just because of the world we're living in here. But I would say...
No, I would be step sibling passion.
Oh, no. What are you doing, step demon lord? Another fun fact. This matte painting, the last matte painting worked on by probably the most famous matte painter in Hollywood history, Al Whitlock.
It's
He's
truly
worked on
beautiful.
all sorts
It really
of stuff.
is.
It was the last one. Other fun stuff about that, the really amazing looking tornado coming out of the hole. I learned that they did that by just having a bunch of cotton on a motion control rig and then like shooting it through it and then, filming it. And then what they would do is they would reset and they would reassemble the cotton And then they would kind of like superimpose all those things on top of each other. So it's just cotton moving really fast, and then it's lit with like strobe lights and stuff. And it looks cool. Now we have the house, which has been destroyed.
Yes, it's still smoldering from the inside.
There's just like rocks on the floor.
There's rocks. There's a gigantic hole.
Yes.
Steven Dorff is like, what am I going to tell Mom and Dad?
I mean, really, it is interesting to me the fact that people thought this was a cop-out at all.
No.
Because, like...
it's exactly what this movie needs. It really is.
And it's also, like... it's right in your... like, this doesn't in any tangible way erase anything that has happened. You know, this is the exact opposite of a cop-out. Is like the emotional through line occurs and he has a greater appreciation for everything that was there. And it like earns the fact that he's able to get them back. And it's like nothing has been reversed here.
No, and I think like the dream sequence, because it's very similar to the dream sequence in the beginning of the film where he walks in and there's nobody there and he's like asking for anybody.
Sure.
And I think that really encapsulates like how alone he's feeling with like, he's kind of having slight friction with his friend, with like his friend trying to scare him and acting weird all the time. His sister, obviously, we've talked about that. But in this, like, he walks in and it's empty and nobody's there. But then they all embrace. And
at the end, it's been restored.
Yes.
And I mean, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, what you're saying with nobody being there, it's the eerie representing itself. It's like, where is my family and friends when they should be here? Because they're not here. And I need to understand why. And the answer was, you know, possibly the demons, but also something internal as well. And he was able to work to resolve like both of them throughout the movie. And then, of course,
we even get Terry's shoe back.
Yes.
Nothing is lost.
I was going to say earlier, I really like that detail where they close the gate and Terry is hopping around because he only has one shoe.
No, and he specifically says like twice, like, they got my shoe. They got my shoe.
Which you would be very worried about if you were a kid.
Yeah.
You'd be very upset about that.
That's it.
That's the gate. And it's a great movie.
What a delightful little film. It really is.
Yeah. Never a movie that was like overwhelmingly popular. And it's not even a movie. It's had a cult following, but it's never something that's had like a cult resurgence where it's become like a major topic of conversation. But it's just been a movie that like consistently draws in all sorts of different audiences. And for a lot of different reasons, because it has so much to offer, I think. And if you're someone who is listening to this for some reason and is scared of horror movies, this is maybe one you could watch and be a little bit less intimidated by because it's less focused on like viscerally terrifying you.
There's some great special effects, but really what makes it great is it's a movie about family.
Fuck you.
But if you want other terrible one-liners, you can check out our other episodes at spectatorfilmpodcast.com. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. You can check out our letterbox if you want to see our horrendous movie recommendations. And that's about it. Austin, any last words?
Join us for the rest of Spooktober. Consider this episode the gate
To
for Spooktober.